Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory, and this is The View from Out Here. I want to start out today with this from Wikipedia about Adolf Hitler and his manifesto Mein Kampf. Now, full disclosure, I edited out a sentence in the middle about people visiting Hitler while he was in prison because it was pretty much extraneous to my point. Here it is. Hitler began Mein Kampf while imprisoned following his failed coup attempt in Munich in November of 1923 and a trial in February of 1924 for high treason, in which he received a sentence of 5 years. The governor of Landsberg noted at the time that he, Hitler, hopes the book will run into many editions, thus enabling him to fulfill his financial obligations and to defray the expenses incurred at the time of his trial. After slow initial sales, the book became a bestseller in Germany following Hitler's rise to power in 1933. Now, I mention this to accent the similarities between these two stories and not to make any accusations. Donald Trump failed in an attempted coup in 2020. Although he didn't write a book, he is known to keep a copy of Mein Kampf in his nightstand. He did, however, add his name to a bunch of overpriced merchandise to fulfill his financial obligations and to defray the expenses incurred at the time of his trial. His latest is a limited edition Les Paul knockoff guitar with a painting of the American flag and an eagle that Trump himself will sign in front of cameras for you for the low clearance sale price of $10,000. And he did rise to power again. We've heard Trump use language that Hitler used about the purity of the blood of their respective countries several times during his campaign. Mein Kampf includes instructions about the use of propaganda, like the concept of the big lie and the demonization, of target demographics to mobilize the power of hatred against them. I want to be clear here. I'm not trying to assert that Donald Trump is the same thing as Adolf Hitler. They're not the same. But rather, I'm positing that there are some parallels in their stories. Donald Trump appears to be borrowing from Hitler's playbook. Donald Trump is a business owner, and he's the sole proprietor of the Trump Organization. Now, what does that mean? How does a business operate as opposed to the operation of the Democratic Republic? We have to start with the acknowledgement that a business, particularly a sole proprietorship, is not a republic, and it's absolutely not a democracy. They are different. In business, the owner calls the shots, and if you disagree with the owner, sooner rather than later, you will end up working somewhere else. You don't get a vote because the Trump Organization isn't about you. It's about Donald Trump, and it's about money, fame, and power. It's also about white supremacy, specifically white Christian male supremacy. Along with the banning of abortion, we are now seeing attempts amongst many social media influencers to redefine masculinity back to a more Christian model where toxic masculinity that had been growing out of fashion since women's liberation is now returning, as evidenced by several well-known influencers like Andrew Tate, North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, Sneeko, and others currently making millions on the internet in what's called the manosphere. It is also why there is currently a push to take rights away from gay and trans people. Gay and trans people generally do not produce more white children. It is also why MAGA Republican Party is so concerned with illegal immigration along the southern border. The overwhelming majority of these immigrants are people of color who further dilute white power. MAGA Republicans don't seem to have nearly as much concern about those crossing the northern border, and the difference is about race. I agree that illegal immigration at our southern border is and should be a concern, but I agree for entirely different reasons than white supremacists do. My concern is about our ability to absorb the needs that these new immigrants bring. Most are escaping serious physical danger with little more than the clothes that they're wearing. The demographic mix of the population of the United States is shifting. And for a white supremacist, that is concerning, which sheds a different kind of light on the banning of abortion. The banning of abortion is also a response to the growth of demographics in the United States that are not white. The Trump Organization is what is called a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship is a dictatorship. And that is the energy that Donald Trump brings to the Democratic Republic because it's what he knows. To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's also why he shows such deference in the presence of other dictators. He admires leaders who control their countries with an iron fist, as he calls it. It's something he demonstrates a powerful thirst to establish here in the United States. Donald Trump is a very thirsty man. This is why you keep hearing me say that Donald Trump is attempting to transform the United States into a wholly owned subsidiary of the Trump Organization. Right now, he has the support of two political parties in his efforts. His MAGA Republican Party, of course, but also appears to have control over what's left of what was once the Republican Party. I say that because he has been able to bring a solid handful of traditional Republicans back into the Trump Organization after they pilloried him so emphatically for January 6th and his sleazy behavior during the campaign. Both of them, come to think of it. People like Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, and Ted Cruz, among others. They are now under his iron fist again because Trump has shown a propensity to back a Brinks truck up into their districts back home and primary them into oblivion, to literally end their political careers. If there's one good thing about all of this that would be in our favor, is that we now know who the courageous patriots are, as well as the groveling simps. The Republican Party has been slowly working toward the sole proprietor concept since about the Nixon administration. Only now, with the added knowledge of what has worked in the past and what hasn't. You may remember the last big play for power with Newt Gingrich's contract with America. They are playing the long game, and they're doing with some measure of success. They don't call it sole proprietor, though. They call it the unified executive theory, the permanent Republican majority. They have already gained control of the judicial branch by stacking the courts, including the Supreme Court, with MAGA-Publican synthesizers, while blocking Democratic nominations, often by refusing to consider them altogether. And now Donald Trump is demanding that the Senate go into recess so that he can get his clearly incompetent cult members into key positions in his cabinet. In so doing, he is beginning the process of taking more and more powers away from the legislative branch and consolidating it into the Trump Organization under his control. Something happened in September during the campaign that a lot of people noticed. During his stump speeches for about a week or so, he was telling people not to worry about voting, that he already has more votes than he needs.
My instruction, we don't need the votes. I have so many votes.
We don't need votes. I tell my people, I don't need any votes. We got all the votes we need. I don't need votes. We don't need votes. We got more votes than anybody's ever had. You don't have to vote. Don't worry about voting. The voting, we got plenty of votes.
Something apparently gave him the confidence to think that the election had already been decided and that voting would be irrelevant. Now, this was in September. Voting anywhere hadn't even started yet. Even early voting was still a month away. It was around that time that Trump began ramping up the viciousness of his attacks on Kamala Harris, his attacks on illegal immigrants, eating the dogs and cats, and his praise of Arnold Palmer's dick. Promises of vengeance and his insistence that the United States was magically transformed from a shining city on a hill in his administration to a failing third world junta in the last 4 years under Joe Biden. There was clearly this kind of seething anger in his voice, and it was palpable just watching him. It was like he was pulling out all the stops and going for the jugular. And for somebody like Donald Trump, that's a lot. Rachel Maddow then reports that as many as 70 MAGApublicans, election deniers all, who were put into election offices in swing states earlier this year. All 7 of those states which Trump would go on to win. Let's put a pin in that. I want to come back to it later. Then, after early voting started, we learned from NBC that something like 50 bomb threats were called into voting precincts in swing states that ordinarily favor Democrats, but none to precincts that generally tend toward Republican voters. And we learned that those bomb threats were originating in South Korea and were using Elon Musk's Starlink to do so. Elon Musk is known to have close ties to the Trump organization and to the Russian government, as does the Trump organization. There's a lot of connections going on there. Meanwhile, analysts and pundits on this side of the aisle are parsing the living daylights out of themselves trying to figure out who to blame, including Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who were about the only people in this whole dog and pony show that acted with any dignity or spoke the truth. There were some mighty powerful forces pressuring the Harris-Walz campaign to get down in the mud with the MAGApublican cult, but to their credit, they did not. They just reminded us of what we were all seeing with our own eyes. Tim Walz is from Minnesota, and I'll bet he knows what I mean when I say this. Never pick a fight with a pig, because you both get dirty and the pig likes it. But the Democratic Party hasn't been able to pin down what we did wrong, so it must be something else. Maybe something that has nothing to do with the Democratic candidates anywhere up or down the ballot. Maybe it was something else. Like maybe the Harris-Walz ticket was up against 2 whole countries and 2 in-house political parties that are chomping at the bit to get down and wallow around in some mud. Given the environment they had to work with, I'd rate their performance as an easy 6 out of 5 stars. Anyway, now Donald Trump wants to get his cabinet seated without the advice and consent of the Senate. I think he knows that even Republicans won't go for some of these folks. I mean, is there a requirement to be nominated to Trump's cabinet that you have to not be able to pass the same background check they give a McDonald's employee? I mean, maybe he wants to get the old band back together for another tour. After all, almost all of them are out of jail now. And by the way, how is it that any of this is okay with the political party that prides itself on its character? You know, the adults in the room? I'm not entirely convinced that this election is as squeaky clean as it seems on the surface. For my comfort, there have been too many sketchy things going on during this campaign, along with entirely too little suspicion about the outcome. I can only hope that there is someone who is in a position to do so, conducting some quiet backroom investigation of what happened to this country on November 5th. In the meantime, I'm resigned to accept that Donald Trump is the president-elect and will become the next president of the United States in January. We know a few things about the president-elect, though. He lies, he cheats, and there's nothing that he won't do in the pursuit of money, fame, and/or power. And the presidency of the United States is the crown jewel of all 3. Hang in there, my people. I wish you peace. I have a postscript for you. Came up just as I finished this episode. There is an investigation going on in the background by a reporter by the name of Greg Palast. And this election was in fact cheated. He details his research on voter purges in a documentary called Vigilante Incorporated. I'll leave a link in the description below. Enough voters were purged from the rolls in swing states to change the outcome of the election, mostly people of color. The documentary is free to watch here on YouTube and at gregpalast.com. I want to thank you for hanging in there with me so far, and if you find anything of value here, please take a second to like and subscribe with the buttons below. Oh, and don't forget about my books. Basic video production, everything you need to know to make video like a professional, and Searching for Saint Germain, the true story of a gay Catholic orphan. I have every confidence that you'll get something useful out of reading either one of those books. You'll find links for both in the description below, and If you have Kindle Plus, you can read them both for free. Meanwhile, my name is Gregory, and this has been The View from Out Here. Much love.